everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be discussing the book The Alchemist, The Secrets of the Immortal Life of Nicolas Flamel by Michael Scott. Now, some of you may already know a little bit about the history or the legends behind Nicolas Flamel only because of Harry Potter. But basically, Nicolas Flamel was an actual person who lived during the 1300s, late 1300s, early 1400s. And then after he passed away, all of these legends started coming out that he was actually an alchemist, which is basically like a scientist from that era. And he created the Philosopher's Stone, which would turn regular metals into gold and would also provide immortal life. That person and those legends are all featured in this book, and there are two other characters in this book that are actual people from history. His wife, I believe her name is pronounced Pernell, I'm not completely sure. And the other one is Nicolas Flamel's assistant, Dr. John Dee. What happens in this book are that the legends are true. Nicolas Flamel and his wife have created the Philosopher's Stone, and they've been, living off of it ever since. And in this book, they're living in a modern day San Francisco. Nicolas Flamel runs a bookshop and his wife works in a coffee shop across the street. They both employ these two teenagers who are twin siblings, Josh and Sophie. One day, the bookstore gets attacked by Dr. John Dee and these creatures, which are called golems. He wants the Philosopher's Stone as well as the Codex, which is the book that is filled with all of these spells, including the one on how to create and use the Philosopher's Stone. There are pros and cons to this book. One of the good things about this book is the fact that it is kind of clever. The author did a lot of research into history and legends and different stories and found a way to kind of work all of them into these stories. Basically, any possible legend that you've heard of is incorporated somehow into this book. It also brings in a lot of new legends and new stories, and often brings a new twist to those old legends that we are all familiar with. I definitely feel that this is a book where if you know a lot about history and legends and things like that, you'll kind of be rewarded by this book because you'll see all the different ways that he's using them and the twists and play on them, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. If you don't know a lot about that stuff, you probably won't enjoy it quite as much. However, with that said, I will say that I wasn't really crazy about this book. I think the only reason why I got through it is because it's a young adult story, so it's kind of short. Again, one of the good things about this book is that it starts off right from the beginning with action scene. Right at the beginning is when Dr. John Dee comes to attack the bookstore, and then after that is when all the explanation kind of comes along, which is good because it kind of brings you in right at the beginning. But then after that, I wasn't really enjoying myself. It's really hard to explain why. It's not that the story is boring per se, but I felt like I didn't care about what was happening. I always like to say you don't have to necessarily like characters in order to enjoy a book. That isn't necessarily a deciding factor about whether or not a book is good or not. But at the same time, I feel like I need to understand the characters. I really didn't like the teenagers that much. I mean, Sophia's okay, but Josh is really annoying, mostly because he keeps questioning everything, which is fine. But after a certain point, it's like you've seen vampires and you've seen monsters and you've seen magic happening around you, and you're still surprised by the fact that mythologies are true, or you keep questioning those mythologies. It's like you just experienced this whole crazy war happening. You've seen it with your own eyes and yet you're still questioning. That doesn't make any sense to me. Another thing is that a lot of first books in series tend to fall into a trap of too much explanation or too much world building, but I feel like this one does kind of the opposite. There's a lot of action going on, but there's very little world building or explanations. It kind of depends on the fact that you know the history behind all of these different people and stories and legends, and that you'll use that information to kind of fill in the gaps where this book doesn't. But at the same time, I felt like that was really hard to do because it is taking its own twist and play on these characters. You can't completely fill in the gaps because you don't know which parts of the story this series is using as truth. Josh, the main character, goes through a lot of different things, and I felt like throughout the entire book he was just being like Edward from the Chronicles of Narnia series, especially in the first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where he's just really stubborn and really obnoxious and won't listen to anyone else and all this stuff. I felt like that was Josh. So if you didn't like Edward, you're not going to like Josh. If you did like Edward, you'll like Josh. One of the things that is revealed pretty early on is that in the prophecies in the Codex, there's the mention of a set of twins. One will destroy the world and one will save the world, or something along those lines. I mean, they're not really that clear about what the prophecy means, because they're not even sure themselves, meaning the characters themselves aren't really sure what it means, because it could be interpreted in different ways. So obviously Sophia and Josh are the twins, and they're building them up to be, you know, the saviors. They mentioned the prophecy very early on in the book, and I feel like they just kept talking about it over and over again without actually doing anything about it until way later in the book. And I felt like I was just waiting for things to happen because they just talked about the prophecy so much. I don't know if it's because it's a young adult and it's meant for younger kids that they did that on purpose, so that way kids would be able to pick up on those things. But at the same time, for someone like me, it wasn't really that enjoyable. I wasn't really crazy about this book. I don't think I'll go on with the rest of the series, only because I don't really care what happens, which isn't good. So I can't imagine myself finishing the series at all. But I will say it's not like a horrible book or anything like that, and I definitely can see why people would like this book. It's not bad by any means, but it definitely doesn't draw me in quite as much as other series have done. If you guys have read this book or have read the other books in the series, please let me know what you thought down below. I'd love to know if maybe the series gets better as it continues on. Maybe then I'll check it out, or if it gets worse, that would be interesting to know as well. And as usual, I'll leave links down below to my Goodreads, Tumblr, and Twitter. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching. Mel by Michael Scott. I actually did that in one take, not bad. He created the philosopher, that person, and those their twin siblings, Josh and I don't even remember what their names, Josh and Sophie.